Good morning, students. Today's topic is female reproductive system and the functions of ovaries. So the topic we will cover under these objectives: an overview of the female reproductive system, and we look into the primary sex organs, the female internal genitalia and the female external genitalia, and the ovaries. The main primary sex organs are the ovaries, their functional anatomy and the functions of ovaries. We will cover these topics. The divisions of the female reproductive tract. So first one is the primary sex organs or the ovaries in females and testes in males. And the main functions of the ovaries is to produce ova and secrete female sex hormones. And the other accessory sex organs are the external genitalia, internal genitalia, and accessory reproductive organs like mammary glands. The functions of the external female reproductive structures are to enable the sperm to enter the body and protect the internal genital organs from the infectious organisms. The internal genital organs form a pathway, genital tract. This pathway consists of the following functions. Vagina, the part of the birth canal where sperm are deposited and from which a baby can emerge. And uterus, where an embryo can develop into a fetus. Fallopian tubes or oviducts, where a sperm can fertilize an egg. And the ovaries, which produce and release eggs. The external structures are all these: mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, clitoris, vestibule, containing the urethral opening, vaginal orifice and hymen, Bartholin's glands and Skene's glands, and the vestibular bulbs. And the internal structures are vagina, uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. External genital organs are the mons pubis, which is a rounded fatty prominence anterior to the pubic symphysis, pubic tubercle. It is a region of adipose tissue above the vagina that is covered with hair. And the labia are rich in nerve endings and blood vessels. They protect the internal organs against the pathogens, and their main function is the sexual arousal. It has two folds of adipose tissue that border each side of the vagina, labia majora. They enclose and protect the other external reproductive organs, and it literally translated as large lips. The labia majora are relatively large and fleshy. It contains sebaceous glands. After puberty, the majora are covered with the hair. And minora are the smaller folds or fourchette of the skin that lie inside the labia majora. It contains no hair follicles or sweat glands. The folds contain connective tissue, numerous sebaceous glands, erectile muscle fibers, and numerous vessels and nerve endings. It surrounds the openings to the vagina, the canal that joins the lower part of uterus to the outside of body, and urethra. So it surrounds the openings of the vagina and urethra. Urethra is the tube that carries the urine from bladder to the outside of the body. And the clitoris, it is a small cylindrical erectile body which measures about 1.5 to 2 centimeters. It is situated in the most anterior part of the vulva. The two labia minora meet at the clitoris, and it is a small sensitive protrusion. It functions solely as an organ of sexual arousal. And the vestibule is formed by the labia minora. It encloses the urethral opening, vaginal orifice and hymen, and ducts from the greater vestibule. Urethral opening is situated in midline just in front of the vaginal orifice. It is about 1 to 1.5 cm below the pubic arch. It lies in the posterior end of the vestibule. It completely enclosed by a septum of mucous membrane called hymen. And hymen is located just inside the vaginal opening. And it has no known function, but it is not always present. And the ducts from the greater vestibular are the Bartholin's glands. There are two Bartholin's glands and one on each side. Each gland has a duct which measures about 2 cm and open into the vestibular outside. It is close to the posterior end of the vestibular bulb. During sexual excitement, it secretes abundant alkaline mucus which helps in lubrication. And coming to the internal genital organs, first one is vagina. It is called birth canal. a tube-like muscular but elastic organ, about 4 to 5 inches long in an adult woman, and its pH is 4, which is very much acidic. It is a passageway for the sperm to the egg and for the menstrual bleeding, and it is an organ of copulation and forms the birth canal of parturition. So there are no glands that are opening into the vagina. The small part of secretion present in the vagina is derived from the mucus discharge of cervix and from the translation of fluid from the vaginal epithelium. So the action of bacteria on the glycogen present in the vaginal secretion produces lactic acid, which maintains the vaginal pH around 4.5. So how the pH is 4 means, because of action of bacteria on the glycogen present in the vaginal secretion that produces lactic acid. Okay, and the main functions of the vagina are, it serves as an excretory duct for the menstrual fluid, and it forms the inferior part of the birth canal. So this is the vagina, as you can see here. This is the uterus and this is the vagina, and the anterior part is the bladder and posterior is the rectum. The posterior wall of vagina is 10 cm long and the anterior wall is only 7.5 cm length. The upper end of vagina is known as the vault, which is pink in appearance, and it connects the external genital organs to the uterus, the organ of sexual intercourse in women. And the fornices of vagina, formed at the top of vagina due to projection of the uterine cervix. There are 4 fornices, one anterior, that is front of the cervix, and one posterior behind, and 2 lateral on either side of the cervix. In the next internal genital organ are the uterus. Girls are born with over a million of egg cells, but only about 400 are released during a lifetime of the menstrual cycles. No new eggs develop after birth. So this is the picture of the uterus. The uterus is a thick-walled, muscular, pear-shaped organ. It is located in the middle of pelvis, behind the bladder and in front of the rectum. It is anchored in position by several ligaments, which you have read in your anatomy. The uterus consists of cervix and the main body, which is called corpus. The cervix is the lower part of the uterus, which protrudes into the upper part of vagina. It can be seen during a pelvic examination. Like the vagina, the cervix is lined with mucous membrane, but mucous membrane of cervix is smooth. Sperm can enter and menstrual blood can exit the uterus through a channel in the cervix. The cervical canal is usually narrow, but during labor, the canal widens to let the baby through. The cervix is usually a good barrier against bacteria, except around the time an egg is released by the ovaries, that is ovulation, and during the menstrual period or during labor. The main functions of the uterus is to sustain a developing fetus. It prepares for this possibility for each month. At termination of pregnancy, it expels the uterine contents. The uterine layers are endometrium, myometrium and perimetrium. Endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus and nourishes developing embryo, built up each month for pregnancy if not shed during menstruation. And myometrium is a muscular, supports the fetus, contracts at birth and to shed the endometrium during menstruation. Perimetrium is a serous membrane that lines the outside of uterus. And coming to the fallopian tubes, so we have seen the vagina and uterus, now the fallopian tubes. So these blue colored ones extending from the uterus are the fallopian tubes or oviducts. So they connect to each ovary. Egg will enter through an opening called fimbriae and cilia sweep the egg down towards the uterus. Fertilization will occur here or it will die within 48 hours. So the uterus is having 2 fallopian tubes, each connecting the ovary on either side, and the released egg from the ovary will enter the fallopian tube through the fimbriae, and the cilia inside the fallopian tube sweep the egg down towards the uterus. So fertilization occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. If it does not occur, the egg dies within 48 hours. The 2 tubes, which are about 4 to 5 inches, and or 10 to 13 centimeter long, extend from the upper edges of the uterus towards the ovaries. The fallopian tubes are lined with tiny hair-like projections or cilia. The cilia and the muscles in the tube's wall propel an egg downward through the tube to the uterus. The egg may be fertilized by a sperm in the fallopian tube. So the parts of the fallopian tube are the intestinal portion, the isthmus, ampulla, infundibulum, and the intramural part. So the fertilization occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. And next, internal genital organs are the ovaries. These are pearl colored, oblong, and about the size of a walnut. So you can see here attached to the fallopian tubes, these are the oblong and size of a walnut. They are attached to the uterus by ligaments. In addition to producing female sex hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, male sex hormones, the ovaries produce and release eggs. The developing egg cells, oocytes, are contained in fluid-filled cavities or follicles in the wall of the ovaries. Each follicle contains one oocyte. So the structure of ovary, it is having medulla and cortex. So the medulla is a supporting framework which is made of fibrous tissue, and it has ovarian blood vessels. Lymphatics and nerve travels through it. Cortex is a functioning part of the ovum. It contains ovarian follicles in different stages. The process of releasing one mature ovum each month into that ovaries fallopian tube. 2 to 3 lakh immature ova in ovaries are present at birth. Hormones from the pituitary cause ovaries to begin producing female sex hormones, and ova begin to mature. Ovum can live about 2 days in fallopian tube. One sperm will enter the ovum, leading to the fertilization or conception. Coming to the most important function of the ovary, it is the oogenesis and follicular development. So when we see in males, it is spermatogenesis, that is production of sperms. Spermatogenesis begins only at the puberty in males, whereas in females, oogenesis, that is the process of differentiation of oocyte into an ovum, begins as early as 10 weeks of gestation. So during the embryonic life, so we can divide this oogenesis into 4 phases, like fetal oogenesis and postnatal oogenesis, prepubertal oogenesis, and pubertal oogenesis. So during the embryonic life, the primary oocytes or the primordial follicles are created by the endodermal cells. At birth, the ovary contains about 1 to 2 million primary oocytes. The ova are suspended in the first mitotic stage, that is oocyte maturation inhibiting factor, and goes through it after puberty. Then they are after puberty, then they are suspended in the second mitotic stage and complete it only if it is fertilized by a sperm. At puberty, only about 3 lakh oocytes remain in the ovaries. During all the reproductive years of adult life, between 13 and 46 years of age, only 400 to 500 of the primordial follicles develop enough to expel their ova. Some remain after menopause but degenerate soon after. So this is the picture. So before birth, what is happening? The primordial germ cells increase in number by mitosis to form the oogonium, repeated cell division, that is mitosis. So they migrate to the ovarian cortex and form the oogonium, primordial ovum. And these oogonia are the stem cells from which ova are derived. And the process begins at 15 weeks and reaches peak between 20 to 28 weeks of gestation. So it is the unique cell which is having both the X chromosomes in the active state. So after this, at birth, the primary oocytes are formed. They enter a prolonged prophase, so arrested in prophase 1. Diplotin stage of the first meiotic division, and remain in this state until ovulation occurs after puberty. And the primordial follicles, the same time follicular development in the ovary, So the diploid primary oocytes become enveloped by a single layer of flat granulosa cells. So single layer of flat granulosa cells, and each primordial follicle is enveloped by thin membrane called basal lamina. They lack a direct blood supply. They are fundamental unit of the ovary. During the peak development, that is 20 to 28 weeks of gestation, the two ovaries contain about 7 million germ cells in the form of oogonia, primary oocytes and primordial follicles. And many germ cells undergo atresia or involution, and at term only 2 million germ cells are present, most of which have developed into primordial follicles. Some are as oogonia and some are as primary oocytes. And each month from puberty to menopause. So the number of primordial follicles present in the ovaries at birth rapidly diminishes after birth, and by 6 months postpartum all the oogonia have been converted into primary oocytes and primordial follicles. By the onset of puberty, the two ovaries contain about 3 lakh primordial follicles. And the oogenesis or formation of ovum occurs in a cyclic fashion after the puberty. Okay, so every month in each ovary, more than one primordial follicle start undergoing maturation process, but only one reaches the maturity and rest undergoes atresia at different stages of development. So at different stages of development, remaining all will be undergoing atresia. Only one starts maturation. Thus, throughout the whole normal reproductive period, only 400 to 450 ova are expelled. The primary oocyte, which is in the prophase of first meiotic division, completes the division just before ovulation. As a result, secondary oocyte. Okay, so this is the secondary oocyte containing most of the cytoplasm and first polar body are formed. The first polar body fragments and disappears. And the secondary oocyte, this is a haploid cell, immediately begins the second meiotic division, but this division stops at metaphase. Okay, so during ovulation, ovulated secondary oocyte, okay, so it stops again in the metaphase and is completed only if the mature ovum is fertilized by a sperm. So meiosis 2 completed only if fertilized. At the time, second polar body is excluded during the fertilization, which again degenerates, and the fertilized ovum proceeds to form a new individual, and fertilization normally occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Okay, you can see here in the follicle. So in the secondary oocyte stage, it is the pre-ovulatory mature follicle, and the ovulated secondary oocyte will be released from the follicle. Okay, and so this is also called Graafian follicle. So it releases during ovulation. So this ovum, secondary oocyte, if it is fertilized with the sperm, then only the meiosis 2 is completed and the second polar body, which is degenerated, and the ovum, it is released, and this will be proceeding to develop a new individual. So if it is not released, or if it is released and the remaining part of the follicle is converted to the corpus luteum, which is again a degenerative or coming out, it is a discharge part which comes out of the vagina along with the normal menstrual bleeding. And the follicular development, the oocyte acquires stromal cell layers, theca and granulosa. Both these produce hormones. Theca has two layers, theca interna and externa. Andrum is secreted by the granulosa layer, which has high concentration of estrogens, which cause positive feedback that cause higher sensitivity to FSH and LH by granulosa, leading to peak in estrogen. And only one follicle fully matures each month, and the remainder undergo atresia. So you can see here the inner one. These are the various stages of the follicular development with containing the ovum inside, that is oogonia, and then primary oocyte and then secondary oocyte. So this is the primordial follicle, primary follicle, and the preantral follicle containing the antrum and the theca interna externa, and then you can see here granulosa cells and the pre-ovulatory or the mature follicle, or it is also called Graafian follicle. And then during ovulation it releases the ovum, and then the ovum is having the corona radiata, and so after that releasing of ovum it will be converted to corpus luteum and the degenerating one and the corpus albicans. So ovulation is a process which occurs 14 days before the onset of menstruation, and it requires a surge in LH hormone due to unknown mechanism. So LH hormone, follicular steroid hormones, that is progesterone, it causes the proteolytic enzymes and the follicular hyperemia and prostaglandins secretion, and the collagenase or the proteolytic enzyme weakens the follicle wall and it causes degeneration of the stigma, and the follicle will start swelling, and this swelling is also because of the plasma translation into the follicle, and all this degeneration of the stigma and the follicle swelling will cause follicular rupture. Stigma is the projection on the ovary. So this follicular rupture will cause evagination of the ovum. So when the LH hormone surge occurs, then only under the effect of the progesterone all these things will happen. Okay, again you can see here how the process of release of ovum occurs from the ovary, and it is entered fertilization day 1 and then zygote cell division, and then along the fallopian tube down into the uterus it will be going and fixing in the uterine wall. So after ovulation, the remaining granulosa and theca internal cells change rapidly into the lutein cells. So theca cells form mainly androstenedione and testosterone and are converted by the granulosa cells into estrogen. They fully develop at 7 days post ovulation and starts to regress 12 days post ovulation due to negative feedback and inhibin. So thank you all. I hope you understood the structure or anatomy and physiology of the female reproductive system and the functions of ovaries. Mainly we have seen the oogenesis. So the picture you have to remember, and the process or the stages of development of the follicle starting from the primordial follicle to the release of ovum, that is the mature follicle. Okay, thank you all.